Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Camouflage of the World. Finally back with another episode. I'm Mike B, and today we're going to be talking about probably my favorite camouflage pattern / uniform that the United States has ever adopted and worn in the field. We're talking about the ERDL, or Environmental Research and Development Lab pattern of green dominant. It's just called the ERDL pattern, green dominant. Some people gave this nicknames during the Vietnam War, like flower power and flower pattern and all that stuff, but basically what happened was, a little bit of a background on here, is in the late 1940s, the US had been experimenting with camouflage through World War II, but just never really wore it, and especially Europe. South Pacific, they started wearing it towards the end, but it really wasn't widely issued to everybody until the early 1960s when we started getting involved in Vietnam. ERDL decided to kind of open up this pattern that they had been experimenting with in the late 1940s, with featuring a bunch of different kind of colors put together, like kind of a brush / stick pattern. And in 1967, they began actually making uniforms out of this. The first uniforms of the ERDL were green dominant, which is what this is, and I'll explain that in a second. And they were actually printed on poplin material. This is ripstop, because this is a little bit later. I'll show you in a second. I'll show you the tag. This one's a size small regular, and actually available in my shop right now as I'm making this video. Probably won't be available anymore by the time you see this video, because somebody's going to grab this. This is a really good condition shirt, and that's why I'm making a video on it, because it really shows the color scheme. Anyway, so first printed on poplin, later on ripstop, and they just kind of took the third pattern jungle fatigues, or the class 1 is what they're called technically, and printed it with a camouflage pattern, but everything else is the same. You'll notice the slant pockets right here on the chest, the 2 hip pockets, and the button cuffs, which are usually rolled up. It's the same material. It's a cotton, 100% cotton ripstop, just printed with a camouflage pattern. Now, in 1967, these started being made. This one is actually dated 1968 from the tag, you can see right there, or let me try to finagle this a little bit. Yep, so DSA 68C. So 1968, this particular shirt was made. It's a rather early one. A lot of these were made in 68 and 69 and 1970. Not a lot were made after that, really, because of the fact that these were only issued to troops actually serving in a capacity of directly supporting the operations in Vietnam. Now, what happened was, because this was such a kind of a new thing, and they had already been printing the olive drab, and not printing, but making the olive drab uniforms from the early 1960s on, the first people that were actually using these were like special forces, LRP teams, long range reconnaissance patrol teams, and other various kind of non-conventional troops in small numbers were actually wearing these. And later on, the Marines really got a hold of this, and they were like, hey, these are amazing. So the first actual large-scale troops to wear the ERDL uniform were the United States Marines, starting in about 1969, and then throughout the entire rest of the war. The Army started getting some of these at the very end, like in the early 70s of the massive involvement. The Army started to get these. You see pictures of guys wearing like a ERDL pants or an ERDL top with an olive drab, other part of the uniform. So mixed uniforms. Pretty interesting. A lot of boonie hats were made in this pattern too. So you see a lot of those floating around. You see a lot of guys wearing olive drab with a ERDL boonie hat. Now, when I say green dominant, there were 2 variations that wound up coming out. In 1968, a brown dominant version, which basically took this color right here, which is kind of a really light lime green, and replaced it with a khaki and kind of made the brown itself darker. And it became the brown dominant. Eventually, I hope to get an original one of those. I used to have one in my collection. I don't know what the hell happened to it. But I'll make a video on that as well. But for this one, we're going to be talking about the green dominant. Now, this was primarily used in what's called the lowland country of Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and all that stuff, Cambodia, Laos, because of the green dominance. Mountainous terrain in the northern part of South Vietnam tended to be more brown and dirt, kind of tones. And the jungles of the Central and South Vietnam were more green, so that's why this was used predominantly down there. They didn't really think about that at the beginning, so this was issued all over the country, but they figured out that the brown dominant actually worked better up north. So you're going to see a lot of these being used in the jungle environments instead of the mountainous stuff up north. Now, this is a fantastically comfortable and practical uniform, and what happened was, after Vietnam, these were actually not produced anymore. They had a bunch of the material still left over, but these stopped. I think these ceased production in 1972 or somewhere around there. which is very interesting. Maybe 1974, who knows? But there's not really an exact date on when they stopped making these. But these were actually only for troops going overseas. These were not issued stateside widely. Now, after that, the Marines kind of said, hey, we really like that material. We don't want to go with the OD anymore. So they ended up printing what's called a transitional uniform, which I actually have one of those somewhere. I'll try to dig that out. You can see it's just like it's like a perfect transition between this and the BDUs. It's very cool. But we're sticking with this for now. So yeah, the ERDL pattern itself is extremely effective. And what happened was, okay, so another cool thing about this, you see how the edges are like really kind of blurry and not defined? That's because in the printing process, there's actually like a template put on this press thing, and a lot of these little things were sliding around, and they ended up printing kind of wonky like that. So some uniforms you see, there's so much inconsistency, just like pretty much every other uniform. Some uniforms you're going to see have very defined lines, right? Just like the later M81 Woodland. And a lot of them, a lot of the early ones, especially like this, because of the slippage of that little template, are going to have these blurred lines, which actually works better when you're talking about camouflage out in a jungle or woodland environment. So yeah, again, this is my favorite uniform probably ever because it combines the comfort and the pragmatism of the jungle fatigues and puts a camouflage pattern that's actually effective on it. The problem I have with the later M81 Woodland is that fact that the splotches are too big and the splotches are very defined, and that's why I like this better because it kind of blends in. Like if you ever look at DPM, if you ever look at British DPM, their colors kind of blend together like this, and most effective camouflage patterns don't have super defined lines. This is no exception. This particular example is in fairly good condition. It doesn't look unissued, but it looks like it was worn very lightly and then put away. So these are not really being reproduced in large scale, especially the green dominant ones that I can find. I'm hoping to change that someday, but there's a lot of money that goes into actually reproducing this pattern itself and getting it correct, and then, you know, getting the correct material and all that stuff. So it's a pipe dream of mine. Maybe someday I'll get them reproduced accurately for big boys like myself. But for now, really the only thing you're gonna find is the originals like this. And these are getting really, really expensive and really hard to find, especially in this good a condition. A lot of them are really used, worn and torn. A lot of them will have an Eagle Globe and anchor either on the pocket or right here, which is pretty interesting because a lot of the Marines actually wore these. Even after Vietnam, they were kind of issued these for a little bit. So anyway, again, it's one of my favorite patterns, if not my favorite US pattern for sure. And I just think that, you know, a lot of camouflage is patterned off of this design. A lot of modern camouflage from a bunch of different countries is patterned off of this particular camouflage pattern. Again, very effective. I wish I could get an original set in fat boy size so I could go out and show you what these actually look like when you're doing a camouflage test, but unfortunately, I'm far too large. Even if I didn't have the gut on me, I'm far too large to find one for cheap that I want to actually go out and run the risk of like tearing in the woods and stuff. But anyway, yeah. So that's pretty much all I've got on the ERDL. I know a lot of you guys wanted me to make this video for a long time, and I finally got a really cool example. Again, this is available for sale at the time of making this video. So if you're watching this and the link doesn't work, you know why, because it's sold out. I only have one of these. I'm going to try to source some of these, get more of them to sell, because I really want people to have these in their collection because they're really hard to find. Again, they only made them for a few years, and they didn't make them in as big a numbers as they did the olive drab jungle fatigues. Okay, so if you got any questions, if I missed anything, I think I pretty much got all the basics covered for ERDL green dominant. And if I did miss anything, feel free to comment and let me know or whatever. And if you got any questions, I'll try to answer them. Not a super expert on this topic, but again, I love the pattern and I respect the hell out of it. And I think it was probably one of the most influential camouflage patterns of the 20th century. So, thanks for watching, everybody. If you consider becoming a supporter on Patreon so I can get cool things like this to do reviews on and kind of teach you about history, that would be great. Patreon allows me to be interactive with you. It's very easy for me to use, and it gives you some benefits too because I post exclusive content on there. We take votes as to what I'm going to spend your donation money on for props, for historical videos, shooting videos, etc., etc. So it's not just me going out and blowing your cash unannounced, and whenever there's no surprises, it's we take votes, and it's pretty cool. Also, if you donate $5 a month or more, you get Discord access, which I'm on pretty much all day, every day, checking it periodically. But you can buy it in at $1 a month, and that's all you need to do. $12 a year helps keep this channel going and keeps the cool content like this coming. I just appreciate you watching, even if you don't want to support the channel. I appreciate you watching. Let me know what you think. Again, I'll try to answer any questions you have in the comments. But yeah, without further ado, we'll end the video. I'll stop rambling, and we'll see you on the next episode of Camouflage of the World.